I thought robbing one house would save my life, but instead, it destroyed everything I knew. The police were seconds away from catching me. I jumped into a random taxi and begged the driver to save me. I promised him every dollar I'd ever make. But he wanted something I never expected. Days later, the man who hid me from the law became the only person who ever made me feel safe. And when my old gang came back to drag me into crime again, I had to choose between the life that almost killed me and the man who gave me a second chance. My name is Ethan Brooks. I'm 22 years old, and this is the unbelievable true story of how I went from being America's most wanted runaway to falling in love with a 55-year-old taxi driver who changed my life forever. Trust me, the ending isn't what anyone expects. I used to believe that hard work always paid off. That's what my mom taught me before she passed away. Keep your heart clean, Ethan, she'd always say. Life may test you, but don't let it change who you are. I tried. God knows I tried. At 22 years old, I was living alone in a tiny apartment on the south side of Chicago. The rent was overdue. The electricity had already been shut off twice that month. My refrigerator was almost empty except for a bottle of water, half a loaf of bread, and a carton of expired milk. Every morning started the same way. Wake up, put on my only clean button-up shirt, print another stack of resumes at the public library, walk for miles from one business to another hoping someone would give me a chance. Every answer was the same. We're not hiring. You don't have enough experience. We'll call you. Nobody ever called. One afternoon, I stood outside a grocery store hoping they needed another cashier. The manager barely looked at my application before shaking his head.
I'm sorry, kid.
That was all. I smiled politely, thanked him anyway, and walked outside before the disappointment hit me like a truck. The streets were crowded, but I'd never felt more alone. People hurried past carrying shopping bags, laughing with friends, planning their weekends while I counted the few dollars left in my wallet. $8. That was everything I had. As I crossed the street, my phone buzzed. It was my landlord. I already knew what he was going to say. Ethan, if you don't pay by Friday, I'm changing the locks. I just need a little more time. You've been saying that for 3 weeks. I know. No more excuses. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and stared at my reflection in a store window. Tall, brown hair, blue eyes. Everyone always said I looked like I had my life together. Looks can lie. Inside, I felt completely broken. Hours later, I found myself sitting alone on a bench in Grant Park as the sun disappeared behind Chicago's skyline. The city looked beautiful. My future didn't. I buried my face in my hands. What am I supposed to do? For the first time in my life, I didn't have an answer. That's when someone stopped in front of me. Mind if I sit? I looked up. The man looked to be in his early 40s. Expensive leather jacket. Confident smile. The kind of person who looked like he never worried about paying rent. I shrugged. It's a public bench. He chuckled before sitting beside me. You've been staring at the ground for 10 minutes. I wasn't aware anyone was watching. I notice people. He studied my face for a moment. You look like someone carrying the weight of the world. I laughed bitterly. Close enough. You hungry? I hesitated. He pointed toward a nearby food truck. My treat. Pride told me to refuse. My empty stomach made the decision instead. A few minutes later, we were eating burgers in silence. It was the best meal I'd had in days. Finally, he spoke. So, what's your story? I don't know why, but I told him everything. The unpaid rent, the endless job interviews, my parents being gone, the constant feeling that life kept closing every door I tried to open. He listened without interrupting. No judgment. No fake sympathy. When I finished, he nodded slowly. I might have something for you. I frowned. What kind of job? The kind that pays fast. That answer immediately made me uneasy. What do you mean? Instead of answering, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card. There was only one name, Victor Hayes. Underneath, it was an address on Chicago's west side. No company? No phone number? He smiled. If you're serious about changing your life, be there tomorrow morning at 8. What exactly do you do? You'll find out when you get there. I stared at the card. This sounds suspicious. It probably does. He stood and adjusted his jacket. But desperate people don't always have the luxury of perfect opportunities. Before walking away, he looked back one last time. Just remember something, Ethan. The world doesn't reward good people. It rewards people willing to take risks. Then he disappeared into the evening crowd. I sat there holding the card. Every instinct told me not to go. This could be a scam. Could be dangerous. Could even get me arrested. I threw the card into a trash can. Then 5 minutes later, I reached inside and pulled it back out. That night I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt colder than usual. Rain tapped against the window while I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Should I trust a complete stranger? What if he really had a job? What if this was finally the opportunity I'd been praying for? Or what if it ruined my life forever? Around 3 in the morning, I finally drifted asleep with Victor's business card still resting on the nightstand beside my bed. At exactly 7 o'clock, my alarm rang. I got dressed, looked at myself in the cracked bathroom mirror, picked up the card, and whispered to my reflection, I don't have another choice. An hour later, I stood outside an old warehouse on the west side of Chicago. The address matched the card. The building looked abandoned. Every part of me wanted to turn around and leave. Instead, I took a deep breath, reached for the rusty metal door, and stepped inside, completely unaware that the decision I was making would change my life forever. Before I could knock, the heavy warehouse door slowly opened. Victor stood there wearing the same confident smile. I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind. I almost did. But you didn't. He stepped aside. Come in. The warehouse looked nothing like I expected. Instead of old machinery, there were comfortable chairs, coffee machines, security cameras, and several men talking around a large table. It almost looked like a small business office. Victor handed me a cup of coffee. Relax. I still don't know why I'm here. You will. The other men eventually left the room, leaving only Victor and me. He sat across from me. Tell me something, Ethan. If someone offered you $10,000 tomorrow, would you take it? I laughed. Without asking questions? Exactly. I hesitated. I'd probably ask a few questions. Victor smiled. That's why I like you. He leaned forward. We're thieves. The room suddenly felt silent. What? We don't hurt people. We don't carry guns. We don't rob families. We steal expensive merchandise from businesses that are insured. I stared at him. You expect me to become a criminal? I expect you to stop starving. I stood up immediately. I can't do this. Victor didn't move. Really? He opened a folder and slid several photographs across the table. Luxury watches, designer jewelry, electronics. No victims. Insurance companies replace everything. Meanwhile, people like us finally get a chance to breathe. I said no. I turned toward the door. Then my phone rang. It was another call from my landlord. I already knew. Ethan, I've rented your apartment to someone else. You have until tonight to remove your belongings. The call ended. I stood frozen. Victor didn't say a word. He simply waited. Slowly, I turned back around. When do I start? Victor smiled. I knew you'd make the practical choice. The first few jobs seemed almost unreal. Late at night, the team entered closed warehouses through unlocked loading docks. One man disabled security cameras. Another collected expensive electronics. Everything was organized. Fast. Silent. Professional. Within 15 minutes they were gone. No violence. No alarms. No injuries. A week later Victor handed me an envelope. Inside was $5,000. I had never held that much money in my life. For the first time in months, I paid rent, bought groceries, purchased new clothes, even replaced my broken phone. Life suddenly felt easy. Too easy. Weeks turned into months. The guilt slowly became quieter. I convinced myself Victor was right. Nobody was getting hurt. Every job became bigger than the last. Soon I wasn't the nervous newcomer anymore. I was part of the crew. Victor even trusted me enough to help plan routes and watch security patterns. "You've got a good head," he told me one night. "You learn fast." I smiled. Maybe I had finally found somewhere I belonged. But deep down, something never felt right. Every time I looked into the mirror, I remembered the promise I'd made to my mother. Keep your heart clean. One evening, Victor gathered everyone around a large blueprint spread across the table. "This one changes everything." The room instantly became quiet. He pointed toward a luxury jewelry distribution warehouse near downtown Chicago. Over $2 million in diamonds. One of the crew members whistled. Victor continued. "One job. One night. After this, nobody has to work for a long time." I swallowed. "This feels different." Victor looked at me. "It is. There'll be more security. But we've watched the place for weeks. We know every shift change. Every camera. Every blind spot. It'll be over in 10 minutes. Another crew member laughed. "Easiest money we'll ever make." I wasn't convinced. The night before the robbery, couldn't sleep. Every possible outcome played inside my head. What if something went wrong? What if someone got hurt? What if the police showed up? The next evening, we parked 2 blocks away from the warehouse. Everyone wore black clothing and gloves. Victor looked at each of us. "No mistakes." The team slipped inside through a maintenance entrance exactly as planned. For the first few minutes, everything worked perfectly. One man disabled the alarm panel. Another opened the storage vault. Bags quickly filled with expensive jewelry. Victor smiled. "I told you." Then, everything changed. Red emergency lights exploded across the building. An alarm screamed through the warehouse. "What?" one of the crew members shouted. "I disabled it." Victor's face turned white. "No." Someone triggered the silent backup system. Before anyone could react, blue and red lights flashed through the warehouse windows. Police sirens echoed outside. "Chicago police. Nobody move." Panic erupted. "Run." Everyone scattered in different directions. Victor disappeared through a side exit. Another man climbed over stacked shipping containers. Someone crashed through a window. I ran without thinking. Heavy footsteps echoed behind me. "Stop!" I could hear officers chasing us. My heart pounded so hard it felt ready to burst. I sprinted through dark alleys, jumping fences and knocking over trash cans. I turned another corner. Police cars blocked the street behind me. I was trapped. Then, across the road, a yellow taxi sat at a red light. Its engine was still running. Without thinking, I yanked open the back door and threw myself inside. The driver, an older man with silver hair and kind blue eyes, looked startled. "What the? Please," I gasped for air. "You have to help me. The police are after me. I'll pay you. I swear. I'll give you everything I have." The driver looked through his rearview mirror. He saw flashing police lights turning onto the street behind us. For a split second, our eyes met. He studied my terrified face. Instead of ordering me out, he quietly locked the doors, took a slow breath, put the taxi into gear, and drove straight toward the approaching police cars. The police cruisers closed in from both sides of the street. I held my breath. "This is over," I whispered. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "Stay down." Without another word, he reached for his radio and calmly spoke like he was finishing a normal shift. "Dispatch, this is cab 214. I'm taking a passenger to the north side." His voice never shook. As the taxi approached the police barricade, one officer stepped into the road. The driver rolled down his window. "Evening, officer. We're looking for robbery suspects," the officer said. "Have you seen anyone running this way?" The driver frowned and pointed in the opposite direction. "I saw 2 men sprint into the alley behind the train station about a minute ago." The officer immediately signaled the other patrol cars. "Move." Within seconds, every police cruiser sped toward the alley. The taxi remained exactly where it was for another 5 seconds. Only after the street became quiet did the driver slowly pull away. I lifted my head. You just saved me. He kept both hands on the steering wheel. I haven't decided whether that was a good idea. We drove in silence for nearly 20 minutes. The bright lights of downtown Chicago slowly disappeared behind us. Instead of stopping at a motel or an apartment building, the taxi entered a quiet residential neighborhood lined with old brick houses. Finally, he parked in front of a small blue home with a white porch. You can come inside. I hesitated. You don't even know me.
No.
But I know what fear looks like. I followed him into the house. The place was simple but spotless. Family photographs covered the walls, though every picture showed only one person. Him. No wife, no children, no visitors, just years of quiet memories. He noticed me looking. I live alone. He carried my attention into the kitchen. I'm Daniel Carter. Ethan. It's nice to meet you, Ethan. He smiled warmly. You look exhausted. I haven't slept in almost 2 days. Then tonight you don't have to worry. He pointed toward the hallway. I only have one bedroom. You can take the bed. What about you? I've spent enough nights in this recliner. I'm not taking your bed. Daniel laughed softly. It's a queen-sized bed. I think 2 grown men can survive one night without arguing. For the first time since everything had gone wrong, I smiled. That night neither of us slept very much. Every sound outside made me think the police had found me. Around 2 in the morning Daniel quietly spoke into the darkness. You're not a bad person. You don't know that. I know people. You looked terrified. I made terrible choices. Terrible choices don't always make terrible people. His words stayed with me long after the room became silent again. The next morning I woke to the smell of pancakes. Daniel stood in the kitchen wearing jeans and an old baseball t-shirt. You hungry? When am I not? He laughed. Breakfast turned into conversation. Conversation turned into lunch. Lunch turned into dinner. For someone who barely knew me, Daniel treated me like family. Days passed. The news continued showing security footage from the robbery. Police still hadn't identified every suspect. It isn't safe for you to leave yet, Daniel said one evening. You can stay until things calm down. I can't keep taking advantage of you. I invited you. You don't owe me anything. I know. But I want to help. Every morning Daniel drove his taxi through Chicago while I stayed hidden inside the house. I cleaned, cooked dinner, fixed little things around the house. One afternoon I repaired a broken kitchen cabinet. Daniel stared at it in surprise. You fixed that? It was loose. I've been meaning to repair it for 3 years. I shrugged. I had time. That evening he smiled more than usual. The house no longer felt empty. Felt lived in. One rainy afternoon the power suddenly went out. The entire neighborhood went dark. Daniel found 2 old candles and placed them on the dining table. I guess we're having dinner by candlelight. I laughed. Sounds more romantic than practical. The words slipped out before I could stop them. For a second, neither of us spoke. Daniel quietly looked away.
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean. It's okay. But something had changed. Over the next several days I began noticing little things. The way Daniel always made coffee exactly the way I liked it. How he remembered every story I told him. How he smiled whenever I walked into the room. How his eyes lingered just a second longer than before. And somehow, I realized I was looking at him the same way. One evening we sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the Chicago skyline orange. It's beautiful, I whispered. Daniel wasn't looking at the skyline. He was looking at me. It really is. I felt my face grow warm. I pretended not to notice. A few days later Daniel came home later than usual. He looked distracted. Everything okay? He forced a smile. Just a long day. But during dinner he barely touched his food. Finally I asked again. He sighed. A passenger today asked if my son was waiting at home. I looked confused. What did you say? I told her, no. He looked down at his hands. Truth is, I've spent so much of my life working that I never built a family. I had relationships. They never lasted. People always thought I cared more about work. Maybe they were right. The room became quiet. I don't think you're hard to love. The words escaped before I could stop them. Daniel slowly looked up. You really think that? I know it. For the first time, his eyes became emotional. A week later, the police announced they had arrested several members of Victor's crew. Only a few suspects remained missing. Daniel walked into the living room holding the newspaper. You should see this. Victor's photograph filled the front page. They're getting closer, I whispered. Daniel nodded. We'll figure it out. He always said we, never you. That single word made me feel less alone. That night we cooked dinner together. While reaching for the same plate, our hands accidentally touched. Neither of us pulled away. The silence felt different. Not uncomfortable. Gentle. Daniel slowly intertwined his fingers with mine. His voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan, I've been trying to ignore this. So have I. I know there's an age difference. I know people would judge us. I know this probably sounds ridiculous. He took a slow breath. But somewhere between breakfast, fixing cabinets, and watching sunsets, I fell in love with you. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Then I stepped closer. You didn't save me because you expected anything in return.
No.
You gave me kindness when I deserved suspicion. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You made me believe I could become someone better. Daniel searched my face. Are you saying? Instead of answering with words, I gently took both of his hands. I lifted one and placed a soft kiss on the back of it. His eyes filled with tears. Then I smiled. I'm saying, I think I've been falling in love with you too. Daniel carefully cupped my face, giving me every chance to step back. I didn't. He leaned in slowly, and our first kiss was gentle, unhurried, and full of relief rather than passion. When we pulled apart, we rested our foreheads together, smiling through tears. For the first time in years, neither of us felt alone. Neither of us realized. Someone sitting inside a parked car across the street had just watched everything. Victor had finally found me. I've heard people say your past always finds you. I never believed it until the knock came. 3 days after Daniel confessed his feelings, we were eating breakfast together when someone pounded on the front door. Daniel looked at me. Were you expecting anyone? I slowly shook my head. The knocking became louder. Ethan. The voice froze my blood. Victor. Daniel immediately understood from my expression. Stay here. He walked to the front door while I stood hidden in the hallway. Daniel opened it only halfway. Can I help you? Victor smiled politely. I'm looking for a friend. I think you've been keeping him here. I don't know what you're talking about. Victor's smile disappeared. Tell Ethan Brooks to stop hiding. There are things we need to discuss. I stepped into the hallway. It's okay, Daniel. Victor's eyes lit up. There you are. He looked me up and down before laughing. I've been searching all over Chicago. You've been busy. I wasn't hard to find.
No.
You were just distracted. His eyes shifted toward Daniel. So, this is why you disappeared. Daniel calmly stood beside me. What do you want? Victor ignored him. Ethan, we're rebuilding the crew. The police arrested some people, but they don't have enough evidence. We're starting over, and I want you back. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You came here. For that? You were one of my best. We made good money together. Victor opened a duffel bag. Stacks of cash filled the inside. Take it. Come back. One job every few weeks. You'll never worry about money again. For a brief second, I remembered who I used to be. The empty refrigerator. The overdue rent. The hopeless nights. Victor noticed the hesitation. I knew you'd remember. Then Daniel quietly stepped forward. I can't offer you that kind of money. Victor laughed. Of course you can't. You're a taxi driver. Daniel nodded. But I can offer him something you never could. Victor crossed his arms. What's that? A future he won't have to run from. The words hit me harder than anything else that morning. Victor looked back at me. So, what's it going to be? The money? Or the old man? Silence filled the front porch. I turned toward Daniel. He wasn't begging me to stay. He wasn't making promises. He simply trusted me to choose. That trust meant more than all the money inside Victor's bag. I looked Victor straight in the eyes. I'm done. Victor frowned. You don't mean that.
Ido.
I'm not stealing another thing. I'm not spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I'm staying here. Victor's face hardened. You think this ends because you say so? It already has. He stepped closer. You know too much. Daniel moved between us. Leave. Victor laughed again. You really think you can protect him? Before either of us could react, Victor shoved Daniel backward. Daniel stumbled against the porch railing. Daniel! I grabbed Victor's arm. Stop! He swung at me, but years of fear suddenly turned into courage. I blocked the punch and pushed him away. Neighbors had already begun opening their front doors. Someone shouted, I already called 911. Victor looked around. Police sirens echoed faintly in the distance. For the first time, he looked nervous. This isn't over. He ran toward his car and sped away before the police arrived. A few minutes later, officers questioned both of us. This time, I didn't lie. I told them everything. The robberies, Victor's operation, the failed jewelry heist, the warehouse, every detail I had been carrying like a weight around my neck. It was terrifying, but when I finished, I finally felt free, because I cooperated with the investigation and helped recover stolen property. Prosecutors took my cooperation into account. I still faced consequences for my role, but I was given the chance to rebuild my life instead of returning to crime. Several months later, life looked completely different. I completed a job training program. Daniel helped me earn my commercial driver's license. On my first day driving a taxi, he handed me a small set of keys. What are these? Our second cab. I looked at him in confusion. You bought another taxi? He smiled.
No.
We bought another taxi. You've been saving every paycheck. So have I. We're partners now. I couldn't stop smiling. Our little taxi business slowly grew. One cab became two. Two became four. Soon we were hiring drivers across Chicago. One evening after work, we parked both taxis near Lake Michigan and watched the sunset together. You know, Daniel said, if you hadn't jumped into my cab that night, we never would have met. I laughed. I was probably the worst passenger you'd ever picked up. You were. But you became the best thing that ever happened to me. I reached for his hand. Even after all those months, holding it still felt like coming home. I gently kissed the back of his hand, just as I had the night we admitted our feelings. Daniel smiled, leaned closer, and we shared a warm, lingering kiss before resting our foreheads together, watching the city lights reflect across the water. I love you, I whispered. I love you too, he replied without hesitation. Sometimes I think about the scared 22-year-old sitting alone on a park bench, convinced his life was over. He thought money would save him. He was wrong. The stranger who rescued me didn't just hide me from the police. He showed me that real love isn't about age, wealth, or the mistakes you've made. It's about finding the one person who believes you can become better than your past. And every morning, when Daniel and I pull our taxis onto the streets of Chicago together, I'm reminded that the greatest escape of my life wasn't running from the police. It was escaping the man I used to be. If Ethan and Daniel's journey touched your heart, please take a second to like this video. It really helps the channel grow. Tell me in the comments. Do you think Ethan made the right choice by leaving his old life behind? And if you love emotional gay romance stories with happy endings, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We upload brand new stories every week, and you won't want to miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story. Red Heart.